I gotta once again thank Nathan on Shuffle for introducing me to this band and reminding me that this album came out. This was one that I completely missed. It was completely off my radar, and he did a top, 20 albums of the summer and fall, and this was one of those records, and I'm like, oh, that's right, I forgot about this band, and I didn't realize that they put out a new album, so let's dive into it. Memento Vivere by Haven of Echoes. So Haven of Echoes is a duo comprised of Paul Sadler from Spires and Andreas Hack, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from Frequency Drift. And they combine a lot of the same kind of singer-songwriter, but atmospheric prog that we get with bands like Anathema or Gazpacho. That's very tangential. It's very atmospheric. There's, longer stretches of music with general builds and gradual climbs. And in 2022, they put out their debut album, The Indifferent Stars. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I found that album a tad underwhelming. They had a 12-minute epic on them of Let Them In, and that was really the only moment on that record that I really appreciated. It just felt very same in terms of this genre of progressive rock. Taking pages from Anathema as well as Gazpacho, it's just like, okay, well, I could just listen to those bands. And I didn't really quite see what set them apart, I felt like it was very pleasant, darker tinges of music. And I felt like they learned what they had with that first record, and they really applied it, and they really surprised me with this one. This one of Memento Vivere has 4 tracks on it. You've got 2 epics. It starts off with the 17-minute track of No Sum Non Curo. Then it also has a 14-minute track of It Walks Among Us, with then 2 tracks kind of sandwiched between them of Ad Infinitum being about almost 9 minutes, and then Assimilation being the last track at just over 8 minutes as well. So right off the get-go, love the structure of this record. I love how it's basically 2 sides of a single disc of like an LP. I love the structure. I love how it's divided, but I also love how they are distinguishing themselves with a lot of their contemporaries. It feels a little bit more 80s Gothic kind of movement and styles on here, blended with a stoner rock aspects to it. There's a lot of dirges on this, and I really appreciate that because that provides the foundation for a lot of these tracks. Starting right off the get-go with the first track of Non Sum Non Curo. This is the longest track, so it really needs to make its statement, and I feel like it does it so well. It opens up with this synthesizer that's very akin to that 80s Gothic soundscape that we would get from some of the new wave acts, but it's not just a copy and paste retread of what's already been done before. They're using that as an atmosphere to build things up, because once we get into, maybe about the first quarter of this track, it opens up into almost like a metal dirge, where we have this really fast beat that you would never hear in that kind of atmosphere. It's got this really aggressive styling to it. This energy that I was begging for that first record is finally found on this track. And these guys have now proven that they're able to construct a brilliant long piece, with the ebbs and flows. It's not just up here the whole time. It's not just down here the whole time. And it's not like a gradual build to a final crescendo. You've got peaks and valleys. And I really appreciate that. I love that after that first kind of aggression, that first explosion of sound, it tapers back down to allow you to kind of catch your breath to then build yourself back up. And I really appreciate, and I don't know if it's a double lay of the single vocals or if the 2 guys are harmonizing with one another, but they do a great job of harmonizing, and the vocal works on here are absolutely stellar. I get the chills down the back of my neck with some of these, high-end singing styles being harmonized with a little bit of a lower dirge. It's almost as if some of those new wave, dirgy gothic singing styles are paired very well with more of the, I don't want to say like glam metal or hair metal bands, but it's kind of got that ebb and flow. It's almost as if Anar Solberg from Leprous is harmonizing with Ross Jennings sometimes, and I really appreciate that. And that is found on the final piece of this first track, the final crescendo. This whole track, the 17-minute track, has been building towards this end part, and all of the pieces that have been kind of played with up until this point are brought together, and it just makes a very satisfying crescendo at the end. And for somebody that's been begging and pleading for some really good prog, this really, really satisfied. Okay, so we got the first track under our belt, the longest one, and it put a lot of my concerns at ease, but I still felt like, okay, we've got more than half of a record still to listen to. Are they still going to be able to hold on to this momentum? Are they still going to be able to hold on to this energy? And with Ad Infinitum, I realized that yes, we can, because this is one of the shorter tracks, the two shorter tracks, and it takes a page, once again, from that synth goth outlook and really unifying it with that kind of stoner rock, stoner kind of manifesto, so to speak. And it does a really good job of slowly building and slowly building and slowly building to a really satisfying crescendo at the end. It's got that dirge. It has that energy that I was kind of feeling the lack of within that last record. But it provides a really great little bit of an interlude, even though it's almost 9 minutes long, between the two big epics. So then we come to the second big epic of It Walks Among Us at 14 minutes. And I think I like this one a little bit better, even though it's a little bit shorter than in Non Sum Non Curo. I'll get it eventually. I just love how big this sound is. They're providing synthesized sounds that sound like a horn section. It's kind of reminding me of like a Steven Wilson Grace for Drowning in that case, where you had these really, really big sounds among this darker atmosphere and this darker landscape. And I love that, they have this big moment right in the center of the track, but then it slowly builds itself back down to then lift itself back up with that same kind of momentum, that same kind of darkness that we would get with this kind of goth wave kind of a soundscape. It feels very fall, it feels very autumn in its approach, and it's really perfect for where we are now within the seasons. This brings us to the last track of Assimilation, and again, it goes out with a very strong and powerful bang. Like, I can see this one being more of the, single off of the album, not just because it's the shortest track, but it feels a little bit more like a radio-friendly single. And I'm not saying that as a diminutive, I'm not saying that as a negative, I'm just saying that more as like a descriptor when you're comparing it to the other three tracks on this record. But I love once again, those eerie soundscapes that these guys are able to like capture, this really autumn style atmospheric landscape with these really dirgy, like almost Scott Walker sounds with the synths and the guitars, and blending those together to create something that's both off-putting but also very inviting. It's almost like a very cozy haunted house in that case. And I still love where this song goes within its ebb and flow. It is very similar to Ad Infinitum, not just because of the length, but also the structure. But I also enjoy how there's like this gradual build, a little bit of a plateau, and then another gradual build and another gradual plateau. And that ending, man, it's so creepy when the lead singers are like whisper singing. It's reminding me of some things from like Nine Inch Nails with Trent Reznor, where it's got this really off-putting, almost primal aspect to it, this guttural oomph about it, where, it's not quite screaming, it's not quite growling because there's no vocalizations. It's literally just the wind passing through your mouth. It's got this like aspect to it. It's like you're in this really cozy haunted house, and hey, there's that creepy scary monster, but you're still too cozy to get up and run. And it's got a really interesting end point that invites you back in, and I want to listen to this album all over again. So yeah, in the end, Memento Vivere, there's no D. Memento Vivere completely surprised me, and it really exceeded all of my expectations, especially since I came into it with such a low expectation after their first release. Not saying that their first release wasn't good, it just, seeing how many people were loving that record, I didn't quite understand it, and I didn't quite see it With this record, I 100% understand it, and I 100% am there for it. You know, I'm there leading the cause in terms of that, hey, you gotta listen to it. This is a really great record. So, yeah, I'm not going to beat around the bush. My final rating for this record is Memento Vivere by Haven of Echoes is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. I have a feeling I'll be listening to this a lot during the rest of this fall, and probably around like November 12th, I'll kind of put it to the back seat so that I can get ready for the Christmas music. But up until that point, I think this is going to be in a high rotation for me. So I highly recommend checking this one out. This one definitely gets the Note seal of approval. This is another run, don't walk to go and listen to it. Highly recommend it. Gets the Note seal of approval. I think you're really going to like this. It's very accessible, so I feel like almost anybody could enjoy this, unless you're only really into pop music that's very like happy and optimistic, because this album isn't the most optimistic. It's not the most happy albums. But yeah, if you're a fan of progressive rock, I highly recommend checking it out. And that's what I've got for Memento Vivere by Haven of Echoes. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's what I've got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.